What's up, folks? Welcome back to the Carson Wagner Show. Just last week, a New York jury made history by awarding $2 million to a detransitioner, the first verdict of its kind in American history. What you're about to learn explains why doctors across the country are scrambling to change how they operate, and why this single case is the end of transgender ideology that has permeated the medical field for so long. Fox Varian is 22 years old. When she was 16, she decided that she wasn't a girl, she was actually a guy. So she underwent a surgical procedure designed to change her gender. The procedure was facilitated by psychologist Kenneth Einhorn, who cleared her for the surgery, and plastic surgeon Simon Chin. Years later, Fox sued the doctors involved in allowing her to do this. Here's what the jury discovered. Fox wasn't just a teenager with gender dysphoria. She was dealing with depression, anxiety, autism, and eating disorder, and the aftermath of a devastating parental divorce and custody battle. She was a traumatized kid struggling with serious mental health issues. The doctors ignored all of it. According to testimony, Dr. Einhorn actually put the idea of surgery in Fox's head, conducted minimal evaluation, and then fast-tracked her to the operating room. The result was permanent disfigurement. If she has babies down the road, she will never be able to breastfeed those babies. Her mental health issues still remain completely untreated. And years later, she came to accept the truth that she is actually still a woman, and she has been a woman the entire time. And the doctors made a very big mistake. So she sued them, and the jury's verdict was crystal clear. They got them on medical malpractice. Fox is getting $1.6 million for pain and suffering, plus $400,000 for future medical costs that she will face for the rest of her life. But here's what the media isn't telling you about what this verdict means for the rest of the medical industry, and this is massive. The verdict was unanimous. 6 jurors, 3 weeks of testimony, and a decisive conclusion about what went wrong. The doctors failed on multiple fronts. According to the jurors, they never properly evaluated Fox's depression, anxiety, autism, eating disorders, or her childhood trauma. They rushed her toward surgery without the thorough psychological screening that medical standards require. They essentially allowed a 16-year-old to self-diagnose her condition. And critically, they failed to provide informed consent, meaning they didn't ensure Fox fully understood that what was about to happen to her body was permanent and irreversible. Now, of course, I would throw in another front that the doctors failed in, which is them being willing to do a transgender surgery in the very first place. We all know that a man cannot become a woman, and we all know that a woman cannot become a man. But there are a lot of people in our society who don't believe that. They have taken this idea of empathy as the greatest good so far that if a gender dysphoric man says that he wants to become a woman, they say, go right ahead, because for them, love is affirmation at all costs, which is not the definition of love. And Christians, that is not the biblical definition of love, but they think it is. And so they will affirm everyone, no matter what crazy thing they're about to do, that will damage their body for the rest of their lives. So sane people know that a woman cannot become a man and a man cannot become a woman. But these doctors are not of the same persuasion. They think a woman can become a man and a man can become a woman. You just got to do some surgeries and it's all good to go. Because, of course, gender is just an identity. It has nothing to do with your chromosomes or how your brain is wired or physical traits that cannot be changed by surgery because they're hardwired so deep into your body. So that would give us 2 main fronts that the doctors failed on. Of course, the front that the jurors gave, which was more of a, well, transgender surgeries are okay, but the doctors did this one really badly. And a whole nother front, which I would add in, which is that transgender surgeries are never okay, and especially on children who don't know what's going on, and they're extremely easily led astray and deluded. Now, to be entirely fair, this case wasn't about banning gender-related medical care entirely. The jury was just asked one specific question. Did these particular doctors follow the accepted standard of care when treating this particular patient? The answer was a resounding no. And that single answer has opened the floodgates in America. Stay with me because the numbers coming out right now that we are seeing is absolutely staggering. As of February 2026, today is February 4th, 2026, and as of today, there are 28 lawsuits filed across the United States, all from detransitioners, all making claims similar to Fox's. And the medical industry is already feeling the impact. Medical insurance malpractice premiums are skyrocketing. Some clinics that provide these transgender services have seen their annual premiums jump from $8,000 to $50,000. Many simply can't afford it, and some are shutting down entirely. Praise God. Why the sudden change? because insurance companies price risk, and a $2 million verdict sends a clear signal. It is now unbelievably dangerous to conduct transgender surgeries on minors because of this massive legal liability in failing to meet the standard of care and ultimately in doing transgender surgeries at all. The industry is adjusting accordingly. Meanwhile, the legal and political landscape continues to shift. 27 states have now banned these procedures for minors, also praise God. President Trump's January 28th, 2025 executive order titled Protecting Children from Chemical and Surgical Manipulation cuts federal funding to institutions that provide these services to anyone under 19. While a federal judge issued a temporary restraining order on parts of the order in March, the broader trajectory is unmistakable and it is headed in the right direction. Transgender surgeries, especially for minors, need to stop. This is an absolute delusion. Women are women. Men are men. There are no third genders. There is no way to cross over. What you're born at birth is what God designed you to be. And since God is perfect and he knows everything and he never does anything wrong, what God designed you to be is absolutely perfect. And it is what you're supposed to be. And it's what he wants you to be. And he has a purpose for your life, which is meant to be fulfilled via you being a man or you being a woman, whichever he created you as. Trying to change that is an unbelievable insult to God and to his image. And I would equate it on a smaller scale with murder, because obviously the biggest problem with murder as Christians is that we look at it and we say, well, you are killing the image of God. You're disrespecting it in such a huge way, and you're acting like the creator. You're taking life from an image of God, which is in no way your responsibility, or you have no authority to do that. This is the same thing. You're looking at what God said and you're saying, this is not good enough. And then you're trying to change it through surgical practices that are honestly extremely dubious and don't actually change the most fundamental parts of what makes us male or female. So as Christians, we need to reject every single part of this transgender madness. This court case is great because it now means that doctors can be held liable for doing transgender surgeries on minors. And from a perspective that values protecting children and upholding biological reality and common sense, this verdict confirms two critical truths, both of which I've already talked about a little bit. First, transgenderism is over. Doctors are now terrified to do transgender surgeries, especially on minors, because they know they can be held legally liable if they make the smallest mistake. Before, transgender surgeries were this kind of protected class of medical procedures that, because of all the political controversy over it, they couldn't really be touched. People would try to sue and not much would happen. But now that barrier is broken. The American legal system relies on precedent. So now that Varian's case has gone through, well, there's precedent. And more detransitioners, and they're already doing it, can start filing lawsuits against the doctors who damage their bodies for the rest of their lives, all for a political delusion that literally has just cropped up in the past 20 years. This is absolutely insane. I can't wait until transgenderism is a memory of the past. It is a hallmark on how corrupt and how wicked and how collapsed our society actually is. So transgenderism is over. Doctors are going to be terrified to do it now, even if it loses them political correctness points at their Democrat cocktail parties. Second, the American people are still sane. The fact that a 6-man jury was able to hold the doctors liable for this proves that there are still people in America who are being put in places that matter to make decisions that are very good for the rest of the country. And it shows that there are still people in the country who see the deeper reality beneath it all, that men are men and women are women. And you cannot change that, because in doing so, you are changing what is already perfect. You are changing what God has made, which is an absolute ridiculous, it's a non-starter. You can't change what God has made. Whatever he made is perfect. So whatever you make is going to be very subpar. And it is incredibly heartwarming and incredibly encouraging to see that even in New York, an extremely liberal and extremely leftist place, there are still people who are sane enough to see the reality, the biological reality between our sexes and our genders, and all of this insanity of political correctness and empathy, this toxic empathy that has taken over the American culture. So extremely encouraging, extremely heartwarming, and I am very, very happy to see that there's still a jury that is still sane enough to unanimously find these doctors liable and fine them $2 million for the unbelievable havoc that they wreaked on these poor kids' lives. And if you are a doctor who performs transgender surgeries, here's the part that should genuinely terrify you. Evidence presented at trial shows that doctors, like many influencers and politicians today, weaponized the threat of suicide. Okay, we've been hearing this for a very, very long time. The most common transgender argument that I hear is, well, if you don't trans them, they're going to commit suicide, which is completely false and not supported by the facts. In fact, transgender people are far more likely to commit suicide than people who are not transgendered, just because you think the grass is greener on the other side of the hill. Well, it's not greener on the other side of the hill. It is the most green where you are right now, because God made you to be where you are right now, and he has you there for a purpose. Even if you have an extremely rough life, he is still in control, but they think the grass is greener on the other side of the hill. So the message to parents is always affirm your child's identity and pursue medical intervention, or they will kill themselves. And it's an extremely emotional argument. It's aimed at the parents, and it's saying you're going to be guilty of your child's death if you don't affirm their gender illusions. Except, again, here's the problem. The evidence doesn't support that claim. These interventions don't actually reduce suicide risk the way we've been told they do. And there's more that these doctors have systematically ignored. Research shows that 85% of adolescents with gender dysphoria also have other mental health diagnoses. Autism is significantly overrepresented in this population. Childhood trauma is a common underlying factor, and social contagion effects, especially from social media, are well documented as causes for gender dysphoria. What the doctors did was just treat the symptom, distress about the body, while completely ignoring the underlying causes: trauma, mental illness, developmental disorders. That's not medicine, okay? This is politically correct ideology masquerading as honest healthcare, and we need to see it as such and call it out every single time. This verdict from New York says not anymore. There are 27 more lawsuits currently pending. The statute of limitations is going to prevent many potential plaintiffs from filing, but the cases just keep coming nonetheless. More detransitioners are speaking out every single month. More insurance companies are reassessing their coverage. More states are passing protective legislation. The Fox Varian verdict establishes that legal precedent that I was talking about earlier. It proves that there are still sane juries in the United States who are willing to hold providers accountable, that ordinary citizens can see through these politically correct narratives that have nothing to do with reality when presented with cold, hard evidence, and that medical standards matter more than the political pressure that jury is going to get for a very long time. For parents worried about protecting their children, your instincts are absolutely correct. You should want to protect your children. For policymakers working on protective legislation, these legal protections do work. We need to outlaw transgender surgeries, and we need to do it permanently. This needs to be a thing of the past. There are some things that we cannot affirm people in, the people that we love in. We have to tell them the truth, because if we don't tell them the truth, they will damage themselves and hurt themselves, and do so in a way that will affect them negatively for the rest of their life, which is exactly what transgender surgeries do. For the medical community, the era of unaccountable, irreversible experimentation on children that damages their bodies to bow down at the altar of sick ideologies is coming to an end. Praise God. Fox Varian showed tremendous courage. She stood up, she told her story in court, and she won. She deserves justice for what was done to her. She was manipulated as a 16-year-old. She saw some stuff on social media, I'm sure, about transgender people, and the seed was planted. Maybe I'm not a girl. Maybe I'm a guy. And then she went to these doctors who only encouraged that and pushed her as fast as they could towards getting these irreversible, damaging surgeries that are going to make it impossible for her to have all sorts of experiences that she previously would have been able to do, like breastfeed her own babies when she has her first baby. That's something she will never, ever be able to do. They have damaged her permanently, and that is absolutely sickening. Fox Varian deserves recognition that her suffering and the manipulation that she went through is real. She deserves recognition that her story matters, and that she was profoundly failed by a medical system that should have protected her, sat her down and said, no, this is gender dysphoria, this is fine, people have this, and we can treat it, but you are a girl, and God made you to be a girl, and he has a purpose for your life as a girl, and it is glorious, and it is amazing, and it is exactly where he wants you to be. That is what the medical community should have done instead of harming her, but they took the easy route, they were politically correct, and they harmed her. So, In the end, this verdict is not going to end the debate over transgender ideologies. Not even close, okay? There are still many people in power who are absolute fanatics who have lost their minds, and they have no problem mutilating children on a regular basis. And they're going to keep fighting this all that they can. All hail the woke. But the debate doesn't actually matter anymore, which is absolutely glorious. We have essentially won the fight where it actually matters. Doctors are going to protect their own skin. They now face real legal liability for rushing children into irreversible, twisted procedures to keep themselves politically correct. Insurance companies are responding to that reality. States are legislating protections. And the courts are finally enforcing basic medical standards and the biological reality that we have been shouting about this entire time. The tide is turning, folks. Not because of politics alone, but because of truth. Because children like Fox deserved far better than what leftist ideology-driven medicine gave them. And because when a jury of 6 ordinary Americans looked at all the evidence, they came to a very simple conclusion. What happened to Fox Varian was wrong, and it needs to stop, and it needs to stop now. Thank you so much for listening to The Carson Wagner Show, and I will see you next week.